Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1022A, and today's date is July 14th, 2016, and the title of the episode is Red Flags Everywhere Central Banks Admit the Economy is Collapsing. Let's get into the economic collapse financial news. Now, today we see the market is being pushed up once again, and if you notice, since we're moving closer and closer to the elections, if you notice, the U.S. government central bankers, they've been pushing the stock market, the Dow, the S&P 500, as high as it possibly can go. As we get closer and closer to this economy falling apart, they've been pushing the stock market, the Dow, the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, to highs that we've never even seen before. They're also suppressing gold and silver, which makes sense at this point, which we knew this was going to happen. They will continually use the stock market to convince everyone that this economy is doing incredibly well. They'll do it up to the very end. And even when this market is coming down, when the whole economy is crashing, they will still try to convince the population that it's okay. Don't worry about it. And we're seeing a lot of anomalies. We're seeing a lot of their statistical information. It doesn't make sense. When we look at initial jobless claims, despite 6 months of deteriorating labor market conditions, the Fed's 19-factor experimental model shows the opposite of what we're seeing right now. Now, we're at 43-year lows for initial jobless claims. So, who is telling us the truth here? Is it the Fed's model that's showing us that the labor market conditions are deteriorating? Or is the Department of Labor telling us the truth where it shows that everything is fine and the job market is doing well? Well, when we look at what's been going on around the country, we realize that people have lost a lot of jobs in retail. Corporations are laying off by the thousands. We see everything contracting at this point, and there's over 1 million plus people out of work since June of 2014, and the number continually grows. And we know from the manipulation and how they calculate unemployment, they calculate it by counting those part-time jobs as a full-time job. So if you have 2 or 3 part-time, it's 1, 2, 3 full-time. If somebody loses a part-time job, well, it depends on how many hours you've been working. If you're working less than 25 hours, you're not really counted as losing a job. So think about this for a second and how they manipulate these numbers. There was a study that was done that shows that 81% of U.S. households, they've experienced flat or falling incomes over the past decade. Since 2008, people have not seen their incomes go up. Most people have seen their incomes fall. Now, in this study, what were the contributors to this? Well, it was the labor market shifts, such as the falling wage share of the GDP, and the economic situation has affected the way many of those with flat or falling incomes view the global economic system, with many of the people saying that they lost faith in the economic system, where the economy is continually declining. And we've been talking about this for quite a while. And we've been showing proof after proof after proof, fact after fact after fact, that this is the case. Now, we're seeing a little bit of inflation. We're seeing the producer prices, they have increased up to 0.5% over the prior month. They only expected to increase by 0.3%. And this is the highest jump since September of 2012. So if we exclude food and energy from this, it still moved up 0.4%. Now, when we look at wholesale inventories, we realize that we're seeing very similar economic indicators that we saw back in 2001 and 2008. Now, wholesale inventories, they reached above 1.40 in 2001 and in 2008. And once they reached that point, some, and back in 2008, moved up a little bit above 1.4. 2001, it went to like 1.41. But as soon as it hit 1.4, all of a sudden, everything started to crash. Well, we've been 16 months above 1.40. Actually, back in 2008, we were 8 months above 1.40. And what happened? Everything came crashing down. So it looks like we are heading in the same direction, but this time it's going to be much worse because the central bankers, they're in a holding pattern. They're waiting to bring this down when it's the right time. And we know what that time is, when they're good and ready. So they can blame it on someone else. Now we're seeing signs that the U.S. housing market is rolling over. Now we mentioned this many times before. I know the Fed is out there with their beige book telling us that housing is doing very well. Larry Young from National Association of Realtors, he is telling us that the real estate market's doing well. Actually, he said that back in 2008 when everything was crashing. And he said during the winter months of 2008 going to 2009, real estate's going to bounce back. So we know that he doesn't know what he's talking about. But there's a new report out there that shows a new threat that's emerging in the U.S. housing market. House flipping by third-party investors at auction is back with a vengeance. Now, this is according to Realty Track. The share of foreclosures snapped up by third-party investors at auctions just hit a record 31% in June. This is a redo of the housing bubble in 2008. Now, we're also seeing that third-party buyers are inexperienced. They're mostly mom and pop. And the institutional investors, they're dumping their flips, and third-party buyers are taking over. And again, we've seen this before. And why is this very important? Because the same kind of decline in institutional buyers was a dramatic harbinger of the last downturn as more seasoned stakeholders headed for the sidelines. So what else are we seeing in the housing market? Well, we're seeing something very similar that happened in 2007, 2008. Spending on furniture and home goods, guess what? It's declining. The latest from Bank of America credit and debit card data, spending at home goods stores has been slowing since the middle of last year. The most recent data shows that this is increasing in a downward trend. This is reaching the lowest since the recession period. So in reality, we are back to where we were in 2007, 2008. And we're seeing the same exact signs. Now, something very interesting, and I mentioned this before, that Credit Suisse is reporting that traffic is declining in the housing market. Traffic has faltered in June. Buyer traffic index took a sizable step back in June, slipping to 41 from 52 in May, indicating traffic levels are below agents' expectations. More agents right now are citing buyers' concerns with the broader economy and the volatile financial markets. They're holding back on purchases. So what they're really saying is that traffic is drying up, the economy is getting worse, and people are nervous right now. So most markets in June, they're showing that traffic is declining. 8 of the 40 markets that they looked at only show that traffic is still moving up. The other 32 markets, they're coming down. What does this tell you? This tells you we have the same situation that we saw once before, and everything that we've been reporting on is now coming true. Don't worry, the U.S. government central bankers, they're still going to make it look like the real estate market's doing very well. But many people are writing in saying, yes, my house has been up for sale for 7 months now. I am getting nothing. Actually, many people are saying that they're just going to take their house off the market right at this point. Now, we're seeing that the central bankers, they kind of admitted that this whole recovery is fake. Remember what they've done. The Fed kept rates at 0% for 7 years. The Fed spent over $3 trillion in QE. The Fed raised interest rates just once in the last 10 years. The Fed is now talking about implementing helicopter money. Actually, when you look at this, this proves that the Fed knows the economy is not growing and the recovery is false. Why else would the Fed be calling the most extraordinary monetary policy in history? Because the recovery is so great and the Fed isn't worried about anything? No. Helicopter money is the nuclear option. The economy is in trouble. They know it. They understand that they've been telling a lie all this time, because if the economy is truly recovering, they can just let the interest rates rise. They don't have to pass the baton to each central bank and have them create money out of thin air, which is QE. They would just let it go because it's fine. They wouldn't have to manipulate the stock market with Bank of Japan and ECB pumping in tons of currency. They know the only thing propping the market higher is their manipulation. So what they're telling us is that, yeah, this economy, it's collapsing. And we don't know what else to do except continually manipulate everything to keep it alive. Now, of course, as we know, they don't want to be blamed for any of this. And we also know that they're planning something much, much larger. They're planning to bring down the economy when they're good and ready. They did it in 1929, did it in 2008. They know exactly how they're going to do it this time. And when they're ready, the blame will go in another direction. This is what the central bankers are famous for. Taking all the credit when the economy is doing well. When the economy crashes, they point the finger someplace else. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.